Hello everyone and welcome to Sunburned Albino List's Top 20 Games of 2023. I look forward to this moment every year when we get to celebrate and appreciate video games on an annual scale, looking back on all the bangers of the recent past. My Game of the Year list is obviously biased towards my personal experience, so if you come into this like, what, but this game is objectively better than this game, true or not, it's about the games that spoke to me the most or that I had the most fun with. Anyone can give you sales figures or critical acclaim, only I can provide my sweet juicy opinions. We'll still have a notable exception category for games others might put in their list that I made a point not to put in mine, and it's definitely a spicy one this year. For the record, I consider all games that came out in the year 2023 for this list with no cutoff date beforehand, while early access games don't count until the year they launch into 1.0. We're going to start with the honorable mentions, then move on to the top 20 while interspersing some notable exceptions, and it's sure to be a smooth ride. Number 23, House Flipper 2. When the first House Flipper came out, I discovered a side of myself that liked decorating spaces in bright, gawky colors and layouts that nobody else appreciates. Clearly, the Sunburned Albino aesthetic is ahead of its time, but in 20 years or so, you'll all come around and I'll be hailed as America's next top remodel. House Flipper 2 lets you paint, clean, declutter, and demolish houses, either for clients and specific jobs or as your own boss in houses you can buy, refurbish, and flip for more money. You can design your own live-in house too, essentially from scratch if you want. Either work with what's there or completely gut the place and start over. Sell everything, the cabinets, the fridge, the toilets, the fucking bushes outside, and put your own stamp of creativity on things. This is the type of game where you get out of it what you put into it. I don't decry rushing the client jobs and half-assing them so you can unlock all the tools you need to get some real work done, but when it comes to your own house, and the ones you buy to flip maybe, I think you'll be a lot more satisfied if you're more thoughtful about what you want in it. This game is pretty much just better than the original in every way, so if you like that one, then this is a must-buy. Number 22, Cassette Beasts. Game Freak has been dumping steaming piles of dog shit on themselves lately, the way they've been handling Pokemon the past couple of years, so when an indie game purports to tackle the creature capture genre in a new way by adding fresh new ideas to the mix, I pay attention. Cassette Beasts doesn't reach the heights of like Monster Sanctuary, for example, but it's still a fun time and its battle system adds a lot of wrinkles, maybe too many. In Pokemon, when a move has a type advantage or disadvantage against another Pokemon, the move does double or half damage, right? Well, in Cassette Beasts, it also adds an effect to the attack. For example, if a Fire-type move hits a Water-type beast, it creates a cloud of steam that heals the Water-type beast over the course of 3 turns, so you really don't want to use moves that aren't good against the opponent. Meanwhile, a super effective attack will also trigger an effect that possibly debuffs the beast it was used against, adding even more importance and complexity to the type matchups, which include new elements like plastic and glass. Instead of individual beasts gaining levels, your character does, which automatically brings any freshly recorded beast to your trainer's level, which is super convenient, but the beasts also have their own XP system with which to learn moves and evolve separately from their level, which is a good way to balance things. There's also boss battles, fusions, side quests, and traversal abilities to unlock and do, so definitely give this a shot if you feel like it. Number 21, Dredge. I have to applaud Dredge for having probably the best fishing mechanic I've seen in a game, which is good for a game completely centered around fishing. It's quick, not too demanding, and allows for an almost cozy experience despite the supernaturally monstrous subject matter. You fish for fish and sell said fish to buy upgrades and pay off debts, but some of the fish are fucked up and grotesque without initial explanation. It's a spooky, mysterious world that's fun to explore for a few hours. Eventually you'll get the gist of it and move on to other things, but it's an A-plus concept. Honorable mentions are now done, so before we get into the top 20, let me hit you with my first notable exception, a category for which there is no order. Notable exception 1, Diablo 4. I feel like there were a good couple months where the community hated pretty much every update this game came out with and sank its initially positive reception into the toilet, but I was gone even before all that. Diablo 4 is one of those games where there's an absurd amount of content to grind, but you have to sort of put yourself in a trance in order to get through it, and if you ever snap out of it, you'll step back and be like, why am I doing 900 filler side quests to farm renown? This is actually boring as hell. And then you'll never pick it back up again. That's basically what happened to me. I was almost brainwashed by the game at first, thinking it was awesome, and I even put it in my top 5 best games of the first half of 2023 back in June, but it's like a spell had been cast on my mind that finally wore off and that I had just had no desire to ever touch it again after getting a couple characters to around level 30. Obviously, you don't have to just grind side quest after side quest, but they kept popping up near me, and ignoring them was hard. Maybe I'm just tired of the formula now, but Diablo 3 is one of my top 10 favorite games of all time, and this game never reached those highs. Now for the top 20 games of 2023. Number 20, Headbangers Rhythm Royale. Finally, a battle royale for band kids. Headbangers pits you and a lobby of 29 others in a series of elimination rounds centered around rhythm, memory, and reflex games. You know how games that have minigames in them, like Fall Guys Rise or Mario Party always have a few duds in the rotation that you hope don't show up. Every minigame in Headbangers is good. Some are better than others, but they're literally all good. It's such a solid roster, and the game is a blast. Maybe I'm biased as a musician, but it just feels nice to win 7 tournaments in a row against the kind of people who go to concerts and clap offbeat. Headbangers Rhythm Royale is free on Game Pass and $20 elsewhere, and I'd love if more people played it so I could get some private lobbies going on stream. Number 19, Bone Razor Minions. Vampire Survivors popularized a new subgenre of auto-attacking wave slayers, and Bone Razor Minions is the most capable one I've seen. Instead of you yourself attacking and getting power-ups, you raise different kinds of skeletons and creatures who have special properties and follow you around protecting you. Much like its inspiration, it's a great game to binge for a couple days until you unlock everything, and it's literally $5 right now, so if you're a broke boy who can't afford overpriced cookies, maybe try this instead. Number 18, Killer Frequency. The most recent entry I played this year, I finished up Killer Frequency around the 20th of December, and I'm glad I took the plunge and the time. It came out back in the summer, but slipped under my radar, and has you playing as a once big-shot radio host forced into a small town station due to some scandal or something, and when a serial killer decides to stalk victims in the night and murder almost the entire police force, your radio station becomes a substitute for 911, where potential victims call you to help them out of dangerous situations through a series of different kinds of logic puzzles and brain exercises. If you screw up, the victims die, and it affects the story. No retries or game overs, so there are multiple endings and different ways things can go. Some of the puzzles are a little tricky, but nothing is too difficult, and there are some red herrings scattered about. In my first playthrough, I successfully solved every puzzle except one because I jumped the gun and made a leap of logic that I was pretty happy with in the moment. I thought that shit was a Sherlock-level deduction, but it turned out to be a trap because I didn't wait until I had all the information. Every time a new caller phoned the station in dire straits, it was genuinely exciting to wonder what we'd have to do next and how we could help him out, and failing the puzzle I did fail made me feel so bad I wanted to resign in disgrace. Killer Frequency has overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, and it totally deserves them. Team 17 publishes tons of bangers, and this is another one to add to the scoreboard. Number 17, Final Fantasy XVI. It's a mixed bag. On one hand, it's got some of the best moments in gaming history as far as spectacle and hype are concerned. Some of those boss battles are actually breathtakingly cool, and the real-time combat is super involved and satisfying with a nice loop of rotating abilities and exploiting stagger to maximize damage per cycle. On the other, it completely fails as an RPG. The most pointless basic-ass level-ups and equipment trade-ins you can imagine, and you can never feel yourself get stronger because the enemies just scale with you. You'll unlock more combat powers and abilities, which is nice for variety and keeping things fresh, but you don't feel stronger. The vast majority of side quests are also mind-numbingly dull and made all the more aggravating by how slow Clive travels, whether on foot or on his Popeye's chicken. If his movement speed was upped by like 50% across the board, the game would be 10 hours shorter and better for it. There's a lot to like about Final Fantasy XVI, but there's a lot of slog associated with it too, so I'm not surprised it wasn't more critically acclaimed. Number 16, Disney Speedstorm. I'm not capping though, I may have fallen off this game in recent months, but when it first came out, I was locked in for multiple seasons and blown away by how smooth the driving felt in a game that by all intents and purposes should have been garbage like basically every other karting game without Crash or Mario in the title. It starts out a little slow, because lower difficulties lower your overall kart speed, but once you go online or grind enough levels to access higher event challenges, you'll be zipping through tracks with a breeze in your hair. The game never stopped being fun for me, I just eventually couldn't juggle both it and Honkai Star Rail. I can only commit to one daily and seasonal grind of a game at a time, or else I'll just have no room for other things, and after picking Disney Dreamlight Valley back up, I just feel like my limbs are being torn off in multiple directions. I do want to come back to this at some point though. Number 15, Disney Dreamlight Valley. These two games should maybe get swapped, it kind of depends on what I'm playing in the moment. But Disney Dreamlight Valley went 1.0 recently and released a big expansion, so I dove back in and got hooked once again. If you're completely unfamiliar, it's basically just Disney's answer to Animal Crossing, but with the added bonus of iconic characters that you get to see interact with characters from other movies. That alone is worth the price of admission if you're a Disney fan, but you also get to design the layout of the valley and gather resources to help your villagers out with quests. There's 29 characters in the game now, which is about twice what there used to be, and it's just a nice cozy game for people who like cozy games. When I boot up this game, I feel warm and relaxed. I like finding people's favorite gifts so I can advance my friendship rank with them. I like the anticipation of bringing a new character to the valley, and they finally added Rapunzel, so if they ever do Mulan, all my character requests will have been granted. They also added a new board game you can play with the villagers called Scramble Coin, where you put statues of different Disney characters on a board that have different movements and effects, and you take turns trying to get as many coins as possible. And I think that's my second favorite game within a game to come out this year, besides the Wheels game from Sea of Stars. Number 14, Contraband Police. If you've ever wanted to be a government-sanctioned racist, this is the game for you. Contraband Police makes you a border patrol guard in the fictional communist country of Afghanistan, where it's your job to screen drivers and their cargo, not only to make sure they're not running drugs, but that their papers are in order too, as well as complying with any weird regulations that may be in effect on a given day. Sometimes they want you to discriminate against people's occupations, sometimes they don't want you to let cars in that look too poor and beat up, and sometimes they just don't want people from certain countries coming over the border regardless of anything. While it would be fun enough as a border guard simulator, it goes deeper with a story that offers narrative choices that allow you to remain supportive of your regime or to join a resistance and sneak certain people over the border to help fight against it. Sometimes people just blow through the gate and you have to chase them down too, which is fun. It's just a super fresh concept that deserves to be checked out. Number 13, Wolong Fallen Dynasty. Team Ninja has a good rhythm going right now, where instead of making Neo 3, they keep making games that could have easily just been Neo 3 because they function almost identically. We had Wolong this year, we're getting Black Myth Wukong next year. Wolong differs a bit from its spiritual predecessor franchise, though. It's a lateral move in most respects, but there are some cool new aspects too. The combat has never been simpler because you can deflect literally anything. A sword slash, a giant dragon bite, hell, you can stand in a pool of fire and continuously deflect the heat. This technically makes the game easier than Neo by a large margin, but a couple bosses are still super demanding, and it's a system that feels good to execute. The other main thing, and something so good I think FromSoft and any other Souls-like game developers should steal, is the Fortitude and Morale ranking system. The game is separated into missions and specific levels like Neo, so within those levels you gain level-specific Fortitude by killing enemies and finding flags hidden around the area. The higher a Fortitude level you have, the more damage you deal, and the stronger you are in general for that level. Alongside this is Morale, which is just the minimum level of Fortitude you can drop down to if you die or take a critical hit. Finding the aforementioned flags raises your morale, which in turn raises the bottom floor of your fortitude so you can retain a higher power level if you get bent over. Across the entire game, you still have separate, all-encompassing stats that you can level up that carry over through everything like a normal Souls-like, but the mission-specific system of fortitude and morale is so good for encouraging you to kill every enemy instead of running by them, and encouraging you to explore the entire level to find all the flags to raise your minimum power. It makes for a much more involved experience where it's always worth doing more. This fortitude system also applies to enemies and bosses who are all of a certain level that can actually be made to lower their fortitude and subsequent stats by filling up their negative key bar by landing consistent attacks and deflecting strikes. This greatly rewards hyper-offensive play. The key system takes a bit to get used to watching out for and taking advantage of, but when you do, it's a game changer. I'm giving Wolong such a long description because I started out liking it, and then I hated it, and then I came back around to really liking it as a result of my understanding of all the systems. So I want people who give it a shot at my recommendation to be prepared that even though I said the combat has never been simpler, the mechanics behind it are a lot to wrap your head around, but once you do, it becomes second nature. Number 12, Fire Emblem Engage. We would have a real contender for the top 3 here if they just added New Game Plus, and yes, I'm still complaining about that. Fire Emblem Three Houses is among my favorite games of all time, and half the reason is because New Game Plus makes it almost infinitely replayable to build up the beefiest, most well-rounded juggernauts of units you can imagine. Engage has that same potential, with the emblem bond rings that unleash the powers of heroes of old for their wearers, and can be cross-pollinated to allow units to inherit permanent skills from multiple emblems. The problem is these things don't carry over to new playthroughs, and it's just the most baffling and pointlessly stupid decision a Nintendo game has made since that time they didn't let Super Mario Party launch with online boards, or when they never gave Pro Controller support to Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Fire Emblem literally had New Game Plus in its last entry, made a new game that would benefit just as much from it, and just said, nah. Yes, I am butthurt, because I was out here trying to quintuple my playtime of this game, but there's simply no reason to replay it. So instead I just got through a pretty good campaign with some cool characters and an eventually good story with maybe the best overall combat in Fire Emblem. One time. It's not enough, dude. I'm starved. Let me feed on you more. I'm like Asterion in Baldur's Gate 3 when the main character says I can have a tiny taste of their blood, bro. I would chop your fucking neck off if you let me. I ain't settling for mere drops. My last pleas have fallen on deaf ears, but please, intelligent systems, add New Game Plus or you're a bitch. Kindly find it in your heart to bless us. Number 11, Hogwarts Legacy. Dude, this game was the king of almost being good enough to be nominated for basically every award category. Hogwarts Legacy is a very good game, and as someone who played upwards of 60 new games in 2023, I can say that with authority. When I was a kid, I read all the Harry Potter books and saw all the movies, but despite that, I never really considered myself a fan. I liked it, but if someone would have asked me, hey, are you a Harry Potter fan? I'd be like, kind of. I let almost all of the lore escape my brain over the years to where playing Hogwarts Legacy was like unlocking the past. The world was instantly intriguing and familiar, and I felt myself feeling like a kid again going through it, excited to get sorted into my house, excited to see what wand I was going to get and all that. I'm a true-blooded Slytherin, for the record, ambition and all that. People said all the big streamers were getting Slytherin, but that's because all the big streamers wanted to be famous and succeeded, so it fits. Anyway, the game isn't perfect by any means. The combat can feel a bit lackluster, even if the combo system is good in theory, with all the pulls and slam extensions you can do. What I can definitely see clear as day across it all, though, is the amount of care that went into it. These devs weren't giving anything less than their best. It's obvious in the little things, like after you capture some magical beasts and you go in the place where you interact with them, the animations associated with that made my jaw drop after getting shafted by Pokemon's lazy bullshit forever. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Compare feeding a Pokemon in a recent Pokemon game to feeding a magical beast in Hogwarts Legacy. The difference is enough to make you laugh out loud. The beasts in Hogwarts Legacy actually know where the food is in relation to their faces and are animated in a way that the food actually goes inside their mouths without relying on obscuring camera angles. They chew it and swallow instead of just opening their mouths and closing them, pretending to eat shit that's 5 feet away till it disappears. Stuff like that is proof that they were really trying. I want these devs to make their own creature capture game and show Game Freak how it's done. Anyway, people ask the question of, if it wasn't Harry Potter, would it still be a good game? And the answer is yes, it just also definitely helps that it's a Harry Potter game. They didn't coast on the IP, they did their best to maximize it. Notable exception 2, Starfield. I cannot believe the devs are out here arguing in Steam reviews like, actually, the hundreds of empty planets is realistic and was a choice and it's fun. You just don't understand what space is and what fun is. I played for 9 hours, dude. You had ample time to educate me on the finer points of fun, but I guess I need remedial classes because that shit was boring. Games that don't have a fun first, realism second mentality are doomed to an eternity of inhaling their own farts. There is no way I should be able to land on a planet with only 3 incredibly distant points of interest on it, where one of them is just another cruise ship making the same mistake of exploring this barren wasteland as I am. I have heard that if you want to have the best Starfield experience, you need to basically beeline the main quests all the way through and ignore every failed distraction, but that is so antithetical to the idea of a Bethesda game that I just can't bring myself to do it. I let myself be bought in by their gameplay deep dive prior to release where they highlighted the best 5% of their game, and I am very disappointed with myself for not noticing the lack of connective tissue. It shows you exciting stuff happening at point A and other exciting stuff happening at point B, but doesn't show you the multiple hours of nothing that often take place in between if you make the grave error of deciding to go your own way. I still think The Elder Scrolls 6 will be a return to form for Bethesda that everyone loves, but I have to resent Starfield for being such a resource vacuum. Its lack of existence could have had us all putting Elder Scrolls 6 at number 1 this year. Before we get to the top 10, I just want to acknowledge some games that came out this year that I think are objectively good, but that I'm not putting in my list because they either weren't really for me or I just didn't feel like dedicating enough time to them. These are games that I know people are going to be looking for and anticipating as the countdown continues, so let me hit you with the cold water now, or lukewarm as the case may be, because I'm still acknowledging that they are good games and you are right to enjoy them as much as you do if you do. So I'm just going to burn through them real quick in no order. Street Fighter 6, I can objectively look at this game and see what an improvement it is over the last one and how much quality is jam-packed in there and see other fighting game players loving it. I just personally can't see myself getting good enough to have fun with it because I feel very bad when I lose at fighting games, and Smash is kind of my ride or die because it's the only one I'm good enough at to not hate myself. Mortal Kombat 1 is a similar case. Great game, really enjoy the story mode. The roster feels super solid and fun to play, but I don't have time to get good enough to want to mess around in online matches. Lastly is Super Mario Wonder, which is by all accounts the perfect 2D Mario game and an amazing example to follow for developer philosophies of how to surprise and delight a player who wants to enjoy your game and how to create something magical without cutting corners or being lazy and formulaic. The variety of the Wonder Seeds is a gift to be cherished, like an unexpected Christmas present that cuts right down to the heart of what you truly want in this world as a gamer. If any game in 2023 teeters on overall perfection in terms of what it sets out to do, Super Mario Wonder gets the closest. That said, I have discovered that I'm just not very interested in 2D Mario anymore, and I want Super Mario Odyssey 2 at Nintendo's earliest convenience. Again, these are all great games. They're just not in Sunburned Albino's top 20 games of the year because they exist outside my personal interest or level of investment. Now, back to the top 10. Number 10, Backpack Hero. This game has come a long way since its Kickstarter days, and to this day is the only game I've ever backed on there. Backpack Hero is a turn-based roguelike where inventory space is everything. You carefully arrange items in your backpack to make maximal use of their effects, and then use energy to click on them to attack enemies or activate stuff. Positioning is of utmost importance. For example, helmets give more armor the more inventory spaces there are below them, and arrows do more damage the more empty spaces there are in the row or column they're facing. This game started out as a bare-bones dungeon crawler with everything already unlocked, but it eventually came out with an entire story mode with a town you help build with resources, while items you bring back from your excursions can be used to research new items, of which there are like 800 or something crazy. Add a half dozen different characters with completely unique playstyles, and you got the best roguelike of 2023. Number 9, Honkai Star Rail. God damn it, MiHoYo, you did it again, but better. China took the world by storm in multiple ways back in 2020, one of which was the release of Genshin Impact, and now in 2023 they have copied their success over to a more contained set of worlds with turn-based combat instead. The leveling and equipment and gacha systems are basically the same, but with this new story, character, and gameplay foundation that I prefer. I've been playing this game daily since February, and I'm only just now starting to feel the burnout, mostly because I thought the Paranormal Investigations event thing they did recently was kind of weak when the events are usually pretty good, and Argenti is the first banner character I purposely skipped because Erudition isn't worth pulling for, and I didn't realize that until after Jingyuan. Insider talk aside, gacha is still gacha, and you are throwing money in the toilet if you buy anything in-game associated with it, but the battle passes are generally worth it, and the 30-day Jade drops you can get for $5 are without a doubt your best value item. If you can avoid the slimy tendrils of FOMO that try to slap you around whenever a new character hits the limited banner and you don't have enough in-game earned currency, or you get fiendishly unlucky, you can have a safe, fun time with what I do think is the best do-your-dailies game I've ever played. Number 8, Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 is my kind of game in many ways. I love upgrading weapons, I love Resident Evil style gameplay, I love exploring a map and finding secrets, and I love piecing together a mystery. I haven't been back to it to do New Game Plus and see the new ending, but I'm sure I will eventually. For a big budget horror game, I actually think horror is what Alan Wake 2 does the worst. There's literally a single earned jump scare in the entire game, maybe two, and everything else is just them flashing, screaming X-ray characters across your screen completely out of nowhere like a cheap indie title. The tension and oppressiveness of the atmosphere is successful at being both tense and oppressive, but in hindsight it rarely ever pays off. You'll go in a dark house with implied scare potential happening every step of the way with perfect setup for something to come out and scare your balls off, but then you'll explore the whole thing and nothing ever happened. Retroactively, there's rarely a reason to ever be nervous or on edge, unless you're in Alan Wake's world, where any given shadow dude within a crowd of them might attack you out of nowhere. Shining your flashlight on dude after dude constantly to see if this one's the one that aggroes is probably the least fun part of the game, and unfortunately a large part of what you do when you play as Wake, but everything else is super compelling gameplay that I could have long 8-hour binges of without getting bored. Number 7, Baldur's Gate 3. Everyone just went, huh? Listen, I think Divinity Original Sin 2, which is this studio's previous game, is the best PC game ever made. I did multiple playthroughs of it, and I assumed that jumping into Baldur's Gate 3 would be a cohesive situation where I would immediately click with it because of how similar they are, but that's not what happened, because they are also different in some key ways. Personally, I prefer Divinity 2's combat. I like the action point system better. I like that your attacks don't have this insane variance of how much damage they can do, and that they actually have decent accuracy most of the time. I like that you don't have these spell slots that need to be recharged at camp, and you never need to go to camp or take long rests to begin with. You just had a sleeping bag in your inventory, you used it outside of battle, boom, party healed instantly, you're back in the fray at a moment's notice, instead of always having to be like, well, I used all my good abilities during that battle, guess I gotta waste time camping now. I do think the characters in Baldur's Gate 3 are instantly more compelling, and that the world and story are improved, and even though I generally don't enjoy or even respect Dungeons & Dragons as an entity, I like the dice rolls aspect for dialogue checks and interactions outside of combat. I wish you could have another character in your party step in and take over a conversation if you discover that the one you initiated with doesn't have the specific attributes you need, though. Like, if intimidation is needed for one of the dialogue options, I wish I could have Lae'zel butt in and threaten to beat the shit out of somebody if my custom character is more of a deception and persuasion guy. I know you could just save scum and initiate with a different character, but I'd rather not feel the need to quick save every 5 seconds before every single conversation of the game. I will say, though, it was rough for me in the beginning. I tried probably 3 different times to really get into this game with no success, but this latest time I'm actually feeling the pieces start to put themselves in place, and I'm optimistic about my future of playing it. I haven't even gotten past Act 1 yet, though I've played most of it several times with several different classes and choices, so take whatever you want that I said with a grain of salt, But while I obviously still think the game is good and that it deserved Game of the Year at the Game Awards based on critic and audience reception, I personally liked some other games more. Number 6, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. It's a bummer that this game had such a sour PC launch because the PS5 was mostly fine with just a few frame rate issues, and it really overshadowed how good of a game this is. People are saying Spider-Man 2 got the Horizon treatment at the Game Awards because it didn't win anything, but Jedi Survivor is another sequel that completely blows its predecessor out of the water and received next to no acclaim for it. I played on the hardest difficulty for the majority of it because I had to make a boss ranking, which made the game absolute suffering at times because it drastically lowers your timing window for parries and makes you take absurd damage from everything. But even through that, I could stand back and look at what I was playing and definitively say that this was a great game. Starfield fucking wishes it had planets like this. There are open world planets, more linear planets, and planets where you only go to one destination, but they are all filled with secrets and extras and upgrades and worth exploring fully. The combat is terrific if you play on a lower difficulty and can actually parry stuff, and the different stances you can take with your lightsaber, like two-handing or dual-wielding or even using a gun, really keep things from getting stale. I don't give a rat's ass about Star Wars as a property, but this and Fallen Order are so good that I still tried to follow the lore and enjoy the story beats. Notable exception 3, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I didn't grow up with Zelda. I've beaten 2 of the games previously, Breath of the Wild and the Link's Awakening remake. I enjoyed the Link's Awakening remake, and I thought Breath of the Wild was okay. I despise how they super overtuned weapon durability as a mechanic, and I find Breath of the Wild combat to be really stiff and slow and lame, which Tears of the Kingdom doesn't change. I will concede, however, that TOTK adds new mechanics that completely revolutionize the whole situation. Ultra Hand alone deserves an award for best game mechanic of the last 5 years at least. Gluing stuff together with telekinesis and creating multitudes of complex contraptions reminds me of the first time I played Minecraft in terms of possibility. Granted, I can't actually make any of the complex contraptions because I don't have a degree in engineering. My shit usually ends up just being a wind-powered wagon that goes the wrong way, but the implications are super cool, and I also appreciate how the game doesn't discourage you from basically blowing it wide open with exploitations and gimmicks to solve puzzles incorrectly. That said, Tears of the Kingdom is basically Breath of the Wild 2.0. Same map that you have to chart again for some reason, like did Link forget he already did this shit before? And if you don't have the tech savvy to build giant all-terrain vehicles, traversal is painfully slow, which means you're spending more time retreading the same areas, which makes their sameness stand out more than it would in games where you can zip around quick. Like, I don't care that Spider-Man 2 is New York again, because I'm still flying through it at breakneck speeds, and a city's a city. It's not that interesting to begin with. Whereas the expectations for a massive open world like Zelda's are higher, because there were so many more cool and unique possibilities they could have done than have you redo the same expanse of land while putting some debris in the sky and some holes in the ground. I spent 9 hours in Tears of the Kingdom's world, and even with Ultra Hand and your other abilities, it still just felt like replaying Breath of the Wild, and every time my weapon broke, it just annoyed me until I didn't want to bother anymore. Play Immortals Phoenix Rising if you're looking for a similar but better experience, and give it your condolences, since Ubisoft canceled the sequel like a bunch of fucking idiots, presumably to make their 7th damn Far Cry game. And now back to the top 5. Number 5, Resident Evil 4 Remake. Resident Evil 4 is just Alan Wake 2, but better in terms of gameplay, so it's no surprise that it's this high up on the list for me. The original is everybody's favorite Resident Evil game. Basically, every game journalist worships it like Beyoncé and would bring it up ad nauseum before the remake was announced. Now people like me who didn't play the original get to know what that's like, because this remake is fantastic and its praises deserve to be sung from every mountaintop, especially since Alan Wake 2 actually overshadowed it this year. To me, there's no question RE4 is the better game, though. It's a blast from start to finish, and the only thing I didn't like was that the infinite ammo New Game Pluses were harder to access and didn't apply to as many weapons as they did in Resident Evil Village, so I didn't play it as much as I did that game. Cheats in single-player games need to make a comeback. I think society has forgotten how fun they are. They can completely revitalize a game you otherwise wouldn't play again. Kingdom Hearts 3's easy codes were so damn fun. We need more games with cheats and more cheats available in said games. Infinite ammo turns Resident Evil into a completely new and hilarious experience. It's so good. So I wish RE4 made that more accessible and applicable. Number 4, Sea of Stars. Taking inspiration from Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG, neither of which I ever played, so that means nothing to me, Sea of Stars blends these ideas and creates an adventure that stands tall as one of the best indie games I've played in years, and it's beefy too. I thought I reached the end at one point and the game was like, psych, have 10 more hours. I really like when games have you level up and increase your stats, but then also let you pick a stat to buff even further. They're like, here's some +2s across the board, but which stat do you want to get a +4 instead? It gives you some agency in the process. That said, it probably doesn't make much difference in this game. Sea of Stars is another Final Fantasy XVI when it comes to the RPG side of things barely mattering, trading up weapons for slightly better weapons and whatnot, but at least you can find rings or bracelets in the world that confer bonus effects, like giving you an extra elemental orb at the start of battle or raising your MP. It also has the best game within a game this year. Wheels is a genuinely fun time where you roll a slot machine to try and stack different modifiers to improve your units as they try to attack your enemy's base. Sea of Stars went above and beyond in terms of care and quality, and if I was a completionist, I'd be sad I'm not in it anymore. Number 3, Spider-Man 2. Does anyone even say Marvel's Spider-Man 2? Like, we know it's Marvel. We don't say Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That sounds stupid. Anyway, Spider-Man 2 is an absolute juggernaut of gaming technology. The way it seamlessly blends cutscenes into action, the way there's not a single loading screen, the way fast travel is instantaneous and maintains your swinging momentum, which is so fucking impressive. Like, the first time you fast travel in this game, if you haven't seen it before, your jaw should be on the floor like a cartoon character seeing titties. Being able to play as Miles or Peter at any given time for the most part is hype. I'm a big Miles Morales fan, but I do think the game series is like actively ruining Peter Parker's character by turning him into a little bitch. He's just constantly apologizing for things that aren't his fault. If MJ walked up to him like, "Peter, you caused 9/11, he'd be like, "Oh god, you're right, I'm so sorry." The first Spider-Man game was a blast to play, but this one is even more so because you have more options in combat with gadgets, skill cooldowns, and even a functional parry. Plus, Miles and Peter have different abilities, so you can always swap out if you're getting tired of one or the other. Another super cool thing I like is that when you're going around stopping crimes and stuff, sometimes you'll run into a fellow vigilante who joins you for that encounter and helps you fight, and they put in work too. It's just a nice sense of camaraderie, and I was always hyped when they showed up. Insomniac was probably the studio who deserved to get hacked the least. They make nothing but bangers consistently, and everyone loves them. Please do not judge stolen alpha builds of games that are years out from releasing and aren't gonna be like that when they do, because publicly criticizing something you weren't meant to see as if it's a finished product makes you an unbelievably dumb piece of shit. Especially because Insomniac has such a strong track record that you know all these games are gonna be fire at launch. Number 2, Dave the Diver. Finally, a game that combines my love of sushi with my ambivalence toward underwater diving. I love sushi so much, I capitalized it in this document without even thinking about it, and now I think I'll be doing that from now on. By day, you're a diver named Dave, exploring a blue hole like a horny smurf and smelling all kinds of fish. By night, you're a restaurateur, also named Dave, and you bring the fish you caught to your sushi restaurant and serve them as different kinds of sushi and other seafood dishes. It's probably the most satisfying loop of any game this year. You're constantly earning money to spend on diving upgrades as well as restaurant upgrades, training staff, improving the payout of dishes, increasing your oxygen tank and weapon damage while underwater, etc., and it's compelling as hell. I cherished each of the 30 hours I spent in Dave the Diver, which at every turn wore the heart of its developers on its sleeve, going above and beyond with stylish cutscenes, anime influences, gameplay change-ups, and the whole thing just dripping with charm. There's some arguments over whether or not this is an indie game based on the studio who made it, but it still has the essence of one, in a way that still makes you optimistic about game development in the future, where people aren't afraid to try new ideas and be different instead of formulaic. Number 1, Lies of P. The unenlightened among you will giggle at the transition between praising one game's willingness to try new ideas and be different into then naming a Souls-like that wears its Bloodborne influence on its sleeve as Game of the Year. Those of you who have played a significant amount of Lies of P, though, remain assured that that philosophy is well taken care of here, too. Lies of P is so much more than a Bloodborne clone. It takes the best elements of many Souls games, adds a few of its own, and creates the spiciest Souls-like dish I've ever had the pleasure of tasting. You got the familiar Bloodborne combat trappings of attacking, dodging, rallying, and healing, mixed with some Sekiro trappings of parrying, stance breaking, and prosthetic tools, with Lies of P's own unique trappings of weapon customization, heal regenerating, grindstone durability, buffed skill trees, and more. It really does feel like the ultimate Souls game, like a final boss that uses all the techniques of previous bosses before him while adding his own twists and flair. The weapon customization alone is a huge mark to leave on the genre. In Lies of P, you can dismantle any non-boss weapon you find into blade and handle, and then swap these things around to create different movesets, special attacks, and stat scaling. You can dismantle as many times as you like, and there's a training ground right next to the workshop where you can test your newfound movesets and damage, so experimentation is highly encouraged, and also rewarded because a lot of these combinations are just straight up better than their original pairings. The combat is great, the bosses are great, the world is gorgeous, the game is meaty and long and only drags a little at the very end, and it's worth multiple playthroughs with different builds, including New Game Plus so you can max out your skill tree. This is not only the best Souls-like game to date, but I like it more than pretty much anything From Software has ever done. This game has the variety of Elden Ring without the travel distance. It has the demanding precision combat of Sekiro without the 3 and 4 phase boss boss fights, and it has the world building and atmosphere of Bloodborne without the 30 frames per second. It's a juggernaut in its own right, and it deserves a place in the conversation when we talk about games that perfected a genre. Well, that's going to do it for Sunburned Albino's Top 20 Games of 2023. This year was an absolute mecca of fantastic video game experiences, and we can only hope that 2024 keeps that train rolling. Thanks for watching this long. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos with a concerned look on your face, and I'll see you guys next time.